Where is the best place to live in Australia? If you're thinking about moving to Australia, this is probably the biggest question on your brain. I mean, I was going to say lips, but it doesn't really work like that, does it? Well, if that's something that you're thinking about, you're in luck. I know a lot of my content is Brisbane focused, but you're in luck today because I've got some mates that don't live in Brisbane. But if you don't live on the East Coast, you're a little bit buggered. So if you're thinking about moving to Perth, well, I'm not going to say don't, but it's still a lovely place to live, I'm sure. So welcome to Caitlin and Maz from the BAMFamilam.
G'day.
And today we're going to share with you 6 different things about where we live, why it's fantastic, probably going to have a little bit of an argument about who lives in the best place to help you decide where you might want to live in Australia. But you're not going to get it all on this video. So once you've finished here, you're going to have to jump across to Maz on the BAMFamilam, and then you're going to have to finish us off with Caitlin, which sounds like a weird sandwich.
First of all, we're going to be talking about lifestyle. Caitlin, tell us about the lifestyle over in Sydney.
So Sydney is a huge place, and I'm actually all the way out in Western Sydney, about an hour away from places like Circular Quay, the Harbour Bridge, those iconic Sydney locations. So all the way out here in the suburbs, it's very chill and relaxed. It's so family friendly, and there are so many activities going on out here in Western Sydney. In fact, right now we actually have a Renaissance fair going on. We have the Sydney Zoo nearby, and also around Ramadan, you have the most incredible night markets out here in Western Sydney. Now, if you want to go a little bit closer to the CBD, obviously you have the most iconic places in the country. You have the Opera House, you have the Sydney Harbour Bridge, Circular Quay, those iconic spots that even though I've lived here for a year and a half, I still get blown away time and time again when I see them. Obviously, Sydney has some of the best restaurants around. We have some incredible food over here, and overall, Sydney is just a pretty incredible place to live. Don't forget, we even have the iconic Bondi Beach if you're a beach person. My dog's going off in the background, great.
But you don't want to live in Sydney. Lifestyle in Brisbane is pretty fantastic. You get the best of both worlds. Up here in the northern suburbs, well, like kind of far northern suburbs. Couldn't afford to live in the actual northern suburbs. We have access to the beach, we've got countryside, and then there's not to forget the fact that in Australia, the majority of the public services, things like parks and stuff for kids, is all really good quality. But if you do want to get into the city, contrary to popular belief that Australian public transport is a little bit crap, getting the train in probably takes about as long as we used to take trying to get into London. And it's cleaner, and the trains are pretty regular, and you don't have to worry about weekend train shut-off things, whatever they used to call them. And the best thing about having everything on your doorstep is the fantastic subtropical weather. That mixture of warm and doesn't get too cold. Just don't whinge too much about it when it gets to the summer. Yes, it's humid, but you get used to it.
We're based here in the Sunshine Coast. And to be honest, I think we've got the best of both worlds because we're not too far from the city. We're about an hour and a half away. But we've also got the most incredible beaches, and it's quite a casual lifestyle up here. So people live to be outside. People are living for the surf, they're living for the sports, they're living for all the amazing scenery and beautiful places to go. So a lot of Sunny Coast locals will be seen climbing up mountains or going on nature walks such as the Noosa National Park. We do work hard, but we also play hard here, and it is all about getting outside and also just being around friends and family.
Too far.
Do you know what, Ross? We have got most of the things that we need up here, but we do obviously head down to Brisbane when we want a real good shop or for picking up family from the airports.
Yeah, but I think Brisbane's got the best proximity. We're just busy enough that you get all of the things that you want in your own lifestyle, but not too busy that you end up sitting in traffic all of the time. Hey, Caitlin.
Ooh, that one hits me where it hurts, Ross. I mean, around here in Sydney, we get some pretty rough traffic, even all the way out in Western Sydney. We're lucky that because we're in a big city, we have pretty reliable public transport most days, but when it comes to traffic, Sydney probably has the worst traffic. As much as I love riding around Sydney and seeing some of the incredible places, you're going to be seeing a lot of them in bumper to bumper rush hour traffic over here. Even all the way out in the western suburb, we're seeing a lot of construction going on out here in Western Sydney, and because of that, even like an hour outside of the city, you're still going to hit traffic. In fact, it's a joke that it takes an hour to get from Sydney to Sydney. So it gets a little bit tough over here, but we also have really reliable public transport. We have buses and trains and ferries that run on time and run pretty regularly. So if you're a commuter, it's pretty common for people to take public transport around here. Don't be afraid to get a car if you live in Sydney. Yeah, you're gonna end up in a little bit of traffic, but it's worth it to get around.
What's public transport like up in the Sunshine Coast? Do they even have any?
Well, Ross, the public transport might be pants here, but quite frankly, our traffic situation is so much better than either of yours because we rarely hit traffic, to the point where I really struggle now if we're put in that situation. If I'm even in a queue for a minute, I'm getting really irritable now, which is obviously nothing, especially compared to what we're used to being from the London area. So traffic-wise, we've got it pretty easy. We don't tend to get stuck in traffic very often unless we head on the Bruce down towards you, down in Brisbane. But public transport-wise, it's okay. I mean, I don't get it very often, and I'll tell you a quick story actually. I did have to get the bus last year, so I'm not someone who uses public transport because I've got a car. I had to get the bus once last year, and it's so complicated. They've got so many zones and different rates and tariffs. I ended up getting a ticket to Brisbane. So I don't know, maybe I'm not qualified to talk about transport, but Lily, my eldest daughter, who's 17, she gets on the bus all the time, and there's a fantastic app called, oh gosh, I can't remember what it's called. There's a fantastic app for all the buses and the public transport, and she seems to think it's pretty easy, and she seems to be able to get everywhere without my help. But obviously, if you move out to maybe the hinterland areas, you might get less bus services per day. So I guess it depends really where you live in the Sunshine Coast. What about you, Ross?
Public transport in Brisbane is okay. But generally getting around Brisbane, I've not got a problem with. Again, we used to live just outside of London, so public transport for us was there, but it was either too busy or too expensive. Oh, I can hear Aurora. The upsides to public transport in Brisbane are that it's cheap, and I'm talking like percentages. No, it's always percentages. And I'm talking like fractions of the cost in comparison to what we used to have to pay for things like trains and buses. But one downside is it does seem to be a little bit sporadic, and they're not necessarily the most interconnected. If you just want to get the train into the city for some fun or for work, it's perfect. Much better than if you wanted to get a car. And that's the biggest problem that most local people report about traffic into Brisbane. If you're trying to get into the city from any direction, especially during rush hour, it's chock-a-block. Now, is it on par to something that I'm used to, trying to get into London? To be honest, it's pretty much the same. And that's why I think that traffic or public transport is definitely relative to wherever it is that you're coming from. If you're used to no traffic, pretty much any of the major cities in Australia are going to seem like they've got lots of traffic. If you're used to bad public transport, then probably some of the public transport systems in Australia, including Brisbane, are going to seem pretty good. But one of the good things that we have for Brisbane is that they're trying to improve everything for the 2032 Olympics. So in comparison to Sydney, where they've ruined it all now, and the Sunshine Coast, which I guess will get a bit of a better infrastructure upgrade, Brisbane has it all.
One thing I did notice about the public transport on the one occasion that I actually used it, and I don't know whether it's the same in Sydney and Brisbane, is that you are not allowed to pay on the public transport. You have to actually get your ticket in advance at a ticket machine. So if you don't really know where you're going or what zone, like what one of the trillion zones you're in, it's really, really complicated and it's really a bit tricky. Is that something, I don't know if either of you have got the bus or train before, but can you pay on when you actually get to the public transport, or do you have to have all your tickets and everything in advance?
Now, Maz, I think we're a little bit more the 21st century down here in Sydney because we don't actually need to pay that way. We can pay on our phones over here, or you can pay on an Opal card that you can preload, or you can pick them up at pretty much any train station over here. So paying isn't really much of an issue over here. You can pay using your Google phone or Apple Pay.
Oh my gosh, that's a game changer. We do have what's called a Go card here, which is something you can top up before you get on. But if you've not got a Go card, then yeah, you do need to buy your ticket beforehand, which for people like me is really complicated.
Brisbane's somewhere in the middle. Yes, we've got the Go card, so you can still do the tappy, but they are recognising that it's 2023 and they're going to need a bit of an upgrade. So they have on some of the lines, you can now start paying with your debit card or even your fancy phone that I don't have.
Let's put the focus on Sydney for a mosey. Caitlin, tell us your favourite spot in Sydney?
So Maz, I've got two of them because I live out here in Western Sydney, but I work in Sydney. And for me, even if it's super touristy, I still love Circular Quay. I still feel like a tourist walking around and seeing the Harbour Bridge, seeing the Opera House. I don't think I will ever get bored of seeing those incredible, iconic Sydney locations. Now, if you're coming all the way out to Western Sydney, I have a little bit of a secret spot that my husband and I go to all the time for date nights, and that is Hey Hey's Kebabs out by Parramatta. They are so good. We love just hopping on the motorbike, spending 20 minutes just driving down to Parramatta and grabbing a kebab. The guy is the sweetest person I've ever met. He makes the best kebabs that I have ever had here in Sydney, and those are probably two of my favorite places since I moved over here.
Now I know I'm painting Brisbane as this fantastic utopia, and I'm sure there's some pretty shit bits too. And we've got some extra things that we need to cover about our specific areas that we live, so if you want to watch the next part, hop over to the Bam Fam Lam right now. See you there.